Growing up in a small town, life always seemed simple and predictable. My father was a mechanic, my mother a teacher, and I was the youngest of 3 brothers who all adored fixing things in Dad's garage. I thrived on that rhythm until college threw me into an entirely different world. It was there that I discovered ambition could coexist with chaos, as I juggled engineering classes and part-time work while learning how much of life's beauty came from unpredictability. Years later, that love for organized unpredictability led me to Kirkland, Washington, a city I now call home. Here, I built a career in financial planning, a profession that suited my meticulous yet adaptable nature. As my professional life thrived, my personal relationships remained an unresolved puzzle. Despite my best efforts, something always seemed to be missing in my attempts to create lasting connections. I spent a good amount of time organizing everything before my 2-week break. Settling into my chair, I turned to the window to enjoy the view, when I heard my assistant, Melanie's cheerful voice. She asked if I was ready for the big day, joking about making sure this marriage stuck, and teasing me about my record for most marriages in a decade. I grinned, acknowledging her humor, and we talked briefly about how it had all been a pile of nonsense. She asked if I needed anything else taken care of, but I assured her everything was in order. I was grateful she suggested I take a break after Wednesday, especially with the Saturday wedding ahead. Tonight, I planned to relax at the pub before diving into the hectic Thursday and Friday. We agreed to keep the wedding low-key. Over the years, Melanie had become one of my closest friends. I brought her on shortly after joining Personal Wealth Financial almost a decade ago. I still remember her interview well. Her credentials were impressive, but when she walked in, she appeared thin, withdrawn, and clearly unwell. Despite her illness, she powered through the interview, showing the kind of resilience that made her an invaluable part of the team. I was impressed enough to bring her in for a second round. That was when I met a firecracker of a person, full of energy and character. Sure, she wasn't the picture of conventional beauty, skinny with little curve to her figure, but what she lacked in appearance, she made up for in confidence and charm. She had a beauty that many of the most beautiful women I knew could only dream of. Her husband was truly fortunate. I decided to unwind for a few hours at my go-to bar in Kirkland, Washington, just a short walk from my place, and enjoy a simple meal. Kaylee, the bartender, has been a constant presence in my life for years, playing a variety of roles. Her striking red hair framed the weathered face of a woman who had become like a second mother to me, my confidant, sounding board, and a compassionate friend. In her youth, she must have been quite attractive, but the hard life and years of smoking had left their mark on her appearance as she entered her late 40s. Still, she was a beautiful person in my eyes. She'd seen me through my lowest moments and always knew exactly what to say when I needed comfort. The pub was sparsely filled and had the familiar smell of fried food and the atmosphere of raw emotions being soothed. As I strolled up to the bar, Kaylee looked my way and smiled. "Mr. 3 Cheats to the Wind. How's my favorite customer?" "Better than I deserve, Kaylee. Are you still chained to that man of yours, or are you ready to run off with me? What, and ruin the big day this Saturday for your lovely bride?" "So, the usual, Luke?" "Yep." As Kaylee hurried to the taps, my attention was drawn to a woman sitting alone a few stools away. I'd guess she was in her mid-30s or older. She was nibbling on her bottom lip, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, likely a reaction to the playful exchange I'd had with Kaylee. I figured I'd try to be polite and say hello. "Hey there." She furrowed her brow, her gaze sharp as she sized me up. "You don't seem drunk." I raised a brow in surprise. "Well, that's a unique way to greet someone." "No, I'm not drunk. The bartender said you were pretty hammered. I figured that meant she thought you were wasted." I chuckled lightly. "Oh, that's just her nickname for me. It's not 3 Sheets to the Wind, it's 3 Cheats." "Wonderful. Another guy who can't control himself." She seemed to press her lip between her teeth more firmly, and the irritated look on her face told me there was some personal history behind her words. Just as I was about to respond, Kaylee set my beer down in front of me and came to my rescue. Kaylee quickly stepped in to defend me, assuring the woman that I wasn't the one who had been unfaithful. As the words sank in, a visible sadness washed over her, and her lips began to tremble. It seemed like she was on the verge of tears, so I nervously offered my hand, hoping to ease the tension and avoid any emotional outburst. She shook my hand briefly, almost as if she was afraid of contact. Then, with a self-deprecating smile, she introduced herself. "Call me been cheated on too many times to count, or Linda for short." I tried to lighten the mood with a joke. "Glad to meet you, Linda for short. Sorry, Sore subject? The humor seemed to help, and her expression softened. She admitted that it was a painful topic, but added that she had a feeling my own story might be worth hearing. I hesitated, but Kaylee nudged me, encouraging me to share. Go on, Luke. Tell her your story, she said. Linda joined in with a playful pout. Please? Resigned, I smiled. All right, let me think. Where do I even start? Life doesn't always go as planned. I realized my marriage was over long before our first anniversary. Oddly, I wasn't heartbroken by the breakup, but my confidence had definitely taken a hit. In high school, during my senior year, I dated Harper, a much more experienced girl. We were set up by friends, and despite my better judgment, my hormones took over. After a game, my teammates made fun of my friendship with Aubrey, calling her a blimp, but I defended her. Aubrey wasn't model pretty, but I loved her for her personality and found her beautiful. We had a close bond, but her strong morals kept us from being more than friends. At a party hosted by Ted, Harper quickly found me. She flirted with me, and despite my initial hesitation, we ended up kissing. By the end of the night, I was deeply attracted to her. Aubrey knew right away. She was hurt, but accepted my dive into the dark side. A few weeks later, she started dating Dennis, our team center. I teased them, saying I had my hands in Dennis's lap more than she did. Aubrey wasn't amused, and Dennis told me to cool it. I apologized, feeling foolish. I was just a dumb teenage boy. I started distancing myself from Aubrey and Dennis. I was living in a way that made their light feel uncomfortable. I wanted to have fun, and they made that harder. Harper and I dated through the rest of the school year and the summer. Our physical relationship was amazing. She was hot and knew what she was doing. After a few months, I began to fall for her. In the fall, Harper went to Washington State, and I went to Purdue on a football scholarship. Despite my growing feelings for her, I knew long distance would be tough. We agreed to keep things casual, meeting up when we were home. For the next 2 years, I let my hormones lead me. Harper and I kept our connection when we were home, but we never discussed what happened when we were apart. I found myself comparing every other girl to her, and no one measured up. I missed her more each time we were apart and started calling her more often. It seemed like she was feeling the same way. By my junior year, I started maturing. The values I'd been taught as a kid crept back in. I was tired of the emptiness of my promiscuous lifestyle, and from that point on, I was only with Harper. I even started thinking about proposing. The summer before our final year of high school, I needed clarity about where Harper and I stood. Hey, can we talk? Of course, Luke. What's up? You look serious. I've been doing some thinking. In the first couple of years of college, I was kind of reckless with girls, but I always knew I had feelings for you, and I knew we'd eventually end up back together. I was just tempted, and girls were easy to find. Did you feel the same way about guys? I hooked up a few times, but I always wished it was with you. No one else was the same. Yeah, I figured that, but lately it's been feeling like I'm cheating. I want to be with just one person. I haven't kissed anyone since last summer, and I hope you feel the same. I only love you, Luke. I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me? Harper jumped into my lap, excited, and shouted, Yes, yes! We made love, then talked about our future. But then, a worried look crossed her face. You don't want to rush into marriage before senior year, do you? No. Maybe a few months after graduation. She seemed relieved, which I took as practicality, but it still bothered me. I also realized I never really got a clear answer about her faithfulness recently. It seemed minor then, but I should have paid attention because it would become an issue later. After graduation, Harper landed a job at a real estate agency, and I started at Personal Wealth Financial Planning. We tied the knot in December, and I thought I was content. I was eager to reconnect with my faith, but Harper showed no interest in anything spiritual. Living together revealed more about her than I expected. The first warning sign appeared right after our wedding. Harper persuaded me to cut our honeymoon short to attend a New Year's Eve party with her college friends. I barely saw her all night. She was off talking to everyone, disappearing for long stretches of time. Some of her girlfriends kept me occupied, almost as if it were their job. Later, I had to carry a passed-out Harper to the car. She was apologetic, so I let it slide. But over the next year, more issues started to build up. She had lots of evening appointments, was secretive about her work, and seemed to prioritize her friends over me. How is it possible to be married less than a year and still feel so alone? Another New Year's Eve rolled around, and I really didn't want to go to the party again, but I felt I needed to see what Harper did when I wasn't around. I decided to stay home, claiming an upset stomach. Harper seemed relieved. A few hours later, I showed up at the party. I tried to stay out of sight, but it didn't take long to spot Harper. She was surrounded by 6 guys, each taking turns kissing her passionately. Then she grabbed one of them and dragged him into a hallway leading to a practice room. The others high-fived each other like they were waiting in line. I stood there, unsure of what to do, but I had to see what was happening. I walked toward the hallway, but Amy, one of Harper's friends, blocked my way. "Luke, Harper said you were homesick." "Out of my way, Amy." "Luke, please, don't go back there." "Why? What will I see?" Amy looked terrified. "Luke, you won't like it. Please, don't. She really does love you." I pushed past her and walked to the practice room. There, I found Harper making out with the guy she'd dragged into the room, both of them starting to undress. I wanted to burst in and confront them, but instead, I quietly took a few pictures on my phone and left. Back at the apartment, I printed one of the pictures and left it on the table with my wedding ring. I packed a bag and went to a hotel for the night. It felt strange. I sat there, expecting to either cry or explode in anger, but instead, it was as if I finally had the answers to all the questions that had been building in my mind. I kept Harper in the dark for a few days while I found a small apartment. Then, I called her to set up a time to talk. "Luke, where the hell are you? How could you just leave like that?" "I'll be over tonight to talk." "Luke, please, I'm sorry for what you saw. It was—" "Shut up, Harper. We'll talk tonight. I'll be there at 7. I hung up, trying to feel something. Anything. A sense of emptiness washed over me. A little anger, a bit of wounded pride, but mostly relief. I had wasted a year, but now everything made sense. My suspicions about Harper had been right. We were never really meant to be. I remembered a conversation I'd had with my dad years ago when I asked how to know when you found the right person. He said, "It's different for everyone. Maybe when you kiss her, your knees will go weak or you'll feel this electric glow. You'll know." I'd never felt that with Harper. Sure, our kisses were passionate, but I realize now it was all physical. I never felt that deep connection my dad talked about. Surprisingly, I was okay. Disappointed, yes, but I was handling it. I arrived at the apartment around 7, walking in without knocking. Harper was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the photo and my wedding ring. When she looked up at me, her expression was one of quiet acceptance. "We're done, aren't we?" she asked. I sat down across from her. "Yes. Aren't you going to get angry or something?" "Why, should I?" "I think I would. It looks like I've finally seen the real you, Harper, and honestly, I don't believe we were right for each other. What's even clearer now is that I never truly loved you the way a husband should love his wife. And I don't think you loved me like that either. Let's end this on good terms and move forward, all right?" I was taken aback by her calmness. She simply shrugged and responded in a way that sealed everything. "I guess I wasn't really ready for marriage. I thought I was. You're the kind of guy I wanted to settle down with, and I wanted to be the wife you needed. I really did. But you're right. It just isn't me." Today, back at the bar, Linda sat quietly, absorbing everything I had shared about Harper. She was thoughtful, reflecting on her own experiences. She commented on how fortunate I was to have figured things out early in my marriage, pointing out that it took her 14 years to realize she had been living a lie. Her words carried a deep understanding of the pain that comes with facing the truth, even after so much time. While the truth could be incredibly painful, it also brought the possibility of moving on, perhaps with a bit more wisdom. As I leaned on the bar, resting my head in my hand, I looked at her, sensing she had her own story to tell. She assured me she was doing better now, but would share her story when she was ready. However, she was still curious about what had happened with me after Harper, eager to hear the rest of my story. I told her that it ended on a more hopeful note, which might offer some encouragement. She listened quietly for a moment, lost in thought, before asking if I still had any contact with Harper. I explained that I did occasionally see her. After our divorce, Harper had been diagnosed with MS, which forced her to mature quickly. She was doing well now, remarried to a good man, and seemed genuinely happy. Linda seemed relieved to hear that, but she then asked if I was the kind of person who took satisfaction in seeing karma catch up with an ex. I quickly reassured her that I wasn't. I would never wish something like MS on anyone, and despite everything, I still had positive feelings toward Harper. We had ended things on decent terms. Curious about what came next, Linda asked about the next chapter in my life, who was number 2. I couldn't help but laugh at her bluntness, which was spot on in capturing how things had gone with Zoe. I first met Zoe at a party celebrating Aubrey and Dennis, who had tied the knot right after college. Dennis, now a young VP at a large corporation, was relocating to Dallas, and we had all gathered at the Hyatt ballroom to send them off. While I was catching up with a friend, the atmosphere seemed to shift when Zoe walked in. She had this natural elegance about her that made the room feel brighter. I later discovered she'd been featured on the cover of Maxim the previous year. She was so captivating that every man in the room, myself included, couldn't help but stare. Most of the men there were married, and their wives quickly went into protective mode. Before long, I found myself one of the only single guys left, and Zoe, noticing, made her way toward me. I tried to keep my cool as she approached, hoping my interest wouldn't be too obvious. Zoe left the party a little early, which gave me a chance to catch up with Aubrey and Dennis. Aubrey still looked as stunning as she had in high school. Maybe not as slim, but perfect in my eyes. When I approached her, she greeted me with a slight frown. She immediately raised concerns about Zoe, asking if I'd already fallen for her charm. I told her that Zoe and I had hit it off, but she seemed uneasy. Aubrey, with Dennis by her side, made it clear they cared about me and didn't want to see me get hurt. She warned me to be cautious, urging me to open my eyes and recognize a familiar pattern in my behavior. Her words stung more than I expected. I felt like she doubted my awareness of what I was doing. I assured her that I would be fine, that it was still early and we had just met. I wasn't planning on rushing anything, especially not marriage. Despite my reassurance, Aubrey pressed me to be careful. She told me Zoe was smart and successful, but asked me to promise that I would remain cautious, reminding me that I deserved someone truly worthy of me. I wanted to tell her I had already found that person, but instead I chose not to argue and let the conversation end. Zoe and I didn't waste time. We connected on all the important things and quickly became intimate. 6 months later, we were married. I made it clear that faithfulness was important to me, and she seemed to share the same commitment. I thought we had what it took for a lifetime together. Zoe ran a small modeling agency and focused on maintaining a good work-life balance. We married simply, full of hope for the future. Our home life was warm, and our intimacy life was incredible. Zoe gave me no reason to doubt her loyalty. After 3 years of bliss, we talked about starting a family. Zoe seemed excited, but I noticed she hadn't taken steps to get pregnant, like going off the pill, as we'd agreed. Still, I felt lucky to have her. Then, just when everything seemed perfect, life threw a curveball. It was a dark, rainy Monday when I got one of the worst phone calls of my life. "Aubrey, what's going on?" I answered, hearing the worry in her voice. "I don't want you to worry, but Dennis has leukemia." "Oh my God, just found out." "Yeah, the doctor says there's a lot they can do now, but still, it's a shock. Dennis is pretending to be okay, but I can see through him. Please keep us in your thoughts." "Of course, I'll be praying for him." I felt helpless, the weight of her words sinking in as I sat there, unable to make sense of it all. I could hear the fear and sadness in Aubrey's voice, even though she tried to sound hopeful. She was trying to mask her own deep anxiety, but I knew her too well. I wanted to be there for both her and Dennis, but I couldn't. We usually caught up by phone once a month, but I promised myself I'd make it weekly from now on. Though thousands of miles away, my friend needed me. The call ended, and I felt overwhelmed, drowning in worry. I stared out my office window at the rain, trying to process everything. Just then, Melanie, my assistant, entered my office, her eyes red and face flushed. I assumed she'd heard about Dennis and Aubrey, but I was wrong. "Luke, you know I love you, right? And I'd never hurt you?" "Mel, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "I've been stressing all weekend about this, but you need to know. My husband and I were out for our anniversary Saturday at a jazz club downtown, and Zoe was there with another guy. I took some pictures. I'm so sorry, Lukey." The photos made it clear. Zoe was all over the guy, kissing, touching, dancing. I felt my world crumble as tears streamed down my face. First, Dennis's diagnosis, now this betrayal. Melanie hugged me tightly, apologizing for ruining their night, but I thanked her for telling me the truth. I printed the photos and prepared myself for a confrontation with Zoe. To gather some courage, I stopped by the pub. Kaylee, the bartender, helped me calm down. Some old friends were there, and 2 of them, football buddies, had already planned to teach Zoe's lover a lesson. I later found out they tracked him down and beat him up. Part of me wished they hadn't, but another part of me was glad. The wait for Zoe to return home felt endless. I was overwhelmed with a mix of anger, regret, and hurt. When she finally walked through the door, as cheerful as ever, I was ready to confront her. She greeted me with her usual enthusiasm and tried to kiss me, but I stopped her, telling her to sit down immediately. She flinched, barely catching herself as she sat in the chair, confused by my tone. I laid the photos out on the table, one by one, and asked her if there was another way I should communicate with her. As she saw the first picture, her face went pale, and tears immediately started to fall. Though a part of me wanted to feel sympathy, my anger took over. I demanded to know what part of faithful she hadn't understood. She tried to say something, but I wasn't having it. I asked her what excuse she would give me this time. Was she going to claim it meant nothing? That it was just casual sex? I couldn't believe she was trying to justify it. She begged me not to hate her, suggesting I take a few days to cool off, but I wasn't interested in her apologies anymore. I wanted to know how many other times this had happened, how many other men she had betrayed me with. My disbelief turned into fury. I couldn't fathom how she could do this to me, especially after what had happened with Haley. Zoe tried to defend herself by claiming I didn't understand a woman like her. That was the final straw. My anger boiled over. I grabbed her by the neck, pulling her face close to mine. I called her something worse than a pig, something lower, a term unworthy of the comparison. I realized then how badly she had fooled me, and the thought of her laughing about it with her boyfriend behind my back sent a rush of disgust through me. I shoved her away, terrified of what I might do next. Her eyes were filled with fear and guilt, and as much as I wanted to feel satisfaction, it only made me more disgusted. I turned away, trying to control my shaking voice. I told her I would never understand a liar or a cheater. She had destroyed everything we had, shattered me, and shown me exactly who she was. I knew I could never trust her again. I paced the room, the sound of her sobbing in the background. I gave her one final order. I wanted her out of the house by that night. My lawyer was already working on the divorce papers, and the prenup was in effect. She had no claim on anything now. I gave her 30 minutes to pack, and I told her everything else would be handled through text. Just as I turned to leave, her desperate cries stopped me. She begged me to stay, telling me she loved only me. I paused, my back still to her. I told her I no longer loved her. When I looked at her now, all I saw was ugliness. I told her not to even try to claim she loved me. Love didn't do what she had done. She loved only herself. I told her to leave before I came back, and I warned her to tell her boyfriend to run, far and fast, back to the bar. Linda paused for a moment before speaking. Your reaction was more intense than I anticipated. Even though we've just met, I get the sense that you're typically a kind and considerate person. Kaylee quickly added, Luke is definitely kind and considerate, but betrayal brings out a different side in all of us. I'll admit, I lost my temper, I responded. But Linda, I know you've been hurt by a cheater before, so maybe you can relate. With Harper, I always knew we weren't meant to be. But with Zoe, I honestly thought she was the one. She tore me apart. I said things out of rage, trying to hurt her without crossing the line physically. But everything I said was the truth. Maybe she'll learn, maybe she won't. So what happened after that? Did you get closure? Or did you part on good terms? I calmed down after a while and we talked. If it had been a mistake, I might have tried to salvage the marriage. I'm not perfect, and I'd want forgiveness if I were in her shoes. But this wasn't a mistake. The affair had started before we even got married, and she wouldn't put an end to it. We separated, but it wasn't amicable. Surprisingly, Zoe agreed to the divorce without much fight. She moved her business to New York, and I haven't heard from her since. What about her lover? You mentioned he got hurt. Did that cause any trouble for you? He had bruises and was in pain for a while, but he healed. What bothered him most was the scar on his eye. It jeopardized his modeling career, but even that faded. Strangely, Zoe ended up being my alibi, since the attack happened 45 miles away while I was at home confronting her. At first, I felt like justice had been served, but that feeling didn't last. Sure, he was a sleazebag, but I didn't want that to happen, and I never encouraged it. So that's two. You've gone for the same type of women and expected a different outcome. I gave a wry smile. Sounds like something my friends would say. They've all told me the same thing. I guess I'm a slow learner because I ended up making the same mistake after Zoe. You're joking. Nope, I wish I were. As bad as it was, you'll probably get a kick out of how I found out about Samantha's affair. Samantha. My divorce was finalized in October 2016, and I decided to head to Dallas to spend Thanksgiving with Aubrey and Dennis. As expected, air travel that week was chaotic, and I ended up stuck at SeaTac for hours due to delays. I was zoning out in the airport lounge nursing a beer when a blonde woman sat down across from me. She was still on the phone, visibly frustrated. She was speaking to someone, explaining that she couldn't control the airline's decisions and couldn't just demand they take off because someone needed her on time. I couldn't help but notice how cute her dimples were when she got worked up. I smiled to myself, but as soon as she ended the call, she looked up and caught my gaze. She immediately shot me a playful but defensive look and asked if I was laughing at her. I quickly apologized, assuring her I wasn't. I told her I had simply noticed how cute her dimples were when she was frustrated. She laughed, and I could see her blush, clearly a bit embarrassed. She explained that her mom was being difficult, expecting her to be on time when the airlines were clearly at fault. I empathized, knowing how stressful air travel could be, and asked if she was okay. She sighed, mentioning that she loved her mom, but that the stress of flying combined with her attitude was a bit much. As she glanced at her phone, I noticed it was ringing, and I pointed it out to her. She groaned when she saw it was her mom calling, but said she was avoiding the call to keep her cool. I offered to buy her a drink, joking that it might help her manage the situation. She raised an eyebrow at me, skeptical of a drink from a stranger, but I quickly introduced myself. When I asked her name, she smiled and told me it was Samantha, or Sam for short. From there, the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked for almost 2 hours before my flight was called for boarding. I was genuinely drawn to her sharp wit and warmth. She wasn't the typical model type like Harper or Zoe, but there was something about her crooked smile and those dimples that made her incredibly appealing. Plus, her athletic build made me realize I might have let myself go a bit over the years. As I stood up to board, I realized I didn't want to let the moment slip away. I asked if she was local, and when she said she lived in Redmond, I took a chance and asked if she was seeing anyone. I suggested we grab dinner sometime. She wrinkled her nose at my boldness, but agreed. She asked for my phone, saved her number under Sam, and handed it back to me. She told me to call her after Wednesday when she'd be back in town. I thanked her and said I never thought I'd enjoy a wait at the airport so much. She giggled and looked even more beautiful in that moment, joking that she might even call her mom back. We hugged, and as we parted, she asked, half serious, if I really liked her dimples, or if it was just a line. I reassured her that I meant it. Her dimples really were adorable. Before we said goodbye, she gave me one last serious look and warned me not to be some weirdo. I laughed, relieved she was joking, and told her she had nothing to worry about. I was far more afraid of boring her than anything else. The flight felt like it took no time at all as I thought about Sam. I was excited. Maybe something real was about to unfold. When I arrived in Dallas, Dennis picked me up from the airport, and I was struck by how good he looked. On the drive to their house, he shared the news that he was in remission. Dennis has always been one of the most genuine people I know, and hearing that he was doing well lifted my spirits immensely. Dennis and Aubrey had 3 kids, and their home radiated warmth and love. Aubrey prepared a fantastic Thanksgiving dinner, and as we ate, she took the opportunity to scold me for my past choices in women. As she spoke, I found myself wondering where Sam would fit into this picture, if things with her worked out. I waited until Thursday to call Sam. I expected a brief conversation to arrange our first date, but instead we ended up talking for over 2 hours. By the time we hung up, I felt like I was walking on air, grinning like a teenager with a crush. It became clear to me in that moment, I wanted her. The day of our first date, I was eagerly anticipating picking Sam up, trying my best not to leave too early, even though her apartment was just a short 3 miles away. I knew that drive would become a regular part of my life in the months to come. We went to Matt's Rotisserie and Oyster House, one of my favorites, where the conversation flowed effortlessly. I couldn't help but be captivated by her, falling for her more quickly than I expected. The more we talked, the more beautiful she became to me. After dessert, we shared some light kisses, but before we left, she pulled me into a deep, passionate kiss. Despite the chemistry, I suggested we take things slow, acknowledging I was still getting over my previous marriage. Sam was patient, understanding, and though she teased me with a playful comment, we both agreed to move at a steady pace. By Christmas, the connection between us was undeniable, and we both admitted we were in love. Our desire for each other became too strong to resist. Being with Sam felt intense, like a workout I hadn't experienced since my football days at Purdue. Thankfully, her favorite position gave me enough time to catch my breath. Getting back into shape quickly became my New Year's resolution. By Valentine's Day, Sam moved in, and we both knew we were ready for the next step. We started planning a small summer wedding, confident in our commitment to each other. Sam had been a competitive volleyball player and stayed active with hiking, kayaking, biking, and jogging on the weekends. We made a game of working out, both using Fitbits to track our progress. I was in the best shape of my life. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in August. We invited just our immediate families and a few friends. Melanie, my assistant, was coming with her husband, and Aubrey and Dennis were flying in. I couldn't wait for Sam to become Mrs. Riley. The ceremony was simple, with only 37 guests, so there was no stress. Sam's sister was the maid of honor, and we had the minister perform the ceremony right at the reception hall. No need to waste time on transportation. As I stood waiting for Sam to walk down the aisle, I scanned the crowd. Melanie was smiling at me from several rows back, but I didn't see Aubrey or Dennis. I hope they hadn't had flight issues. After we said "I do" and kissed, we started the celebration. But as the reception went on, I grew more concerned about not seeing Aubrey or Dennis. 2 hours in, my phone buzzed with a text from Aubrey. "Luke, I'm sorry we missed your special day. Dennis's cancer came back, and he was hospitalized yesterday. We're okay, but I hate that I wasn't there. Call me when you get back from your honeymoon." I showed Sam the message, and she agreed I should call Aubrey right away. When I did, Aubrey tried to reassure me, but I could tell she was scared. Dennis was in serious trouble, and she wasn't hiding it well. Sam and I spent our honeymoon in Hawaii, and I made a conscious effort not to think about Dennis and Aubrey's situation. Despite the emotional weight, the trip turned out to be wonderful. Sam was incredibly attentive, providing both emotional support and physical closeness, making the experience feel special. A few weeks later, in mid-September, we flew to Dallas to visit Dennis and Aubrey. Their kids greeted me with warm hugs, calling me Uncle Luke. But what truly struck me was the sight of Dennis. The strong, athletic man I once knew had become frail and weak, his complexion pale. I had a hard time hiding my shock, but did my best to maintain a sense of normalcy. After dinner, Sam helped Aubrey with the dishes, and Dennis pulled me aside into his den. "Luke, you probably figured I'm not going to beat this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Come on, Dennis, you're a fighter," I replied. "Life's a fight we all lose eventually. I'm at peace with it, but I'm worried about Aubrey and the kids. I've taken care of them financially, but promise me you'll watch out for them. The kids need their godfather, Uncle Luke, and Aubrey needs her best friend." "You don't even need to ask. I'll look out for them. You know that," I said, choking up. "I love you, man." "I know," Dennis replied softly. "The feelings are mutual. You're a good man, Lucy." I couldn't hold back the tears. I thought guys weren't supposed to cry. "Real men do, buddy," Dennis said, his voice tight. We sat in a moment of heavy silence until Dennis broke it. "By the way, Sam seems awesome. I hope you two have a long, happy life together." 2 weeks later, Dennis passed away. His service and burial were in Washington, where their families lived. Aubrey and the kids stayed with us for a few weeks as we supported them through the difficult time. Sam was incredible, always there for me as a true partner. Months later, Sam shared an idea with me. Hugh, the owner of a local gym, was planning to retire and had asked if we were interested in buying it. While Sam was content with her job at Microsoft, owning the gym had always been her dream. She was eager to make it happen, but without the capital to buy both the business and the building, she needed help. I had been doing well in the market and had considered starting an LLC for real estate investments, so we decided to move forward. We set up Riley Investments, and Sam established a separate LLC for the gym. I helped her secure a line of credit for the necessary improvements and operating expenses. With our accountant and lawyer on board, everything moved forward smoothly. We celebrated that weekend with plenty of kisses and passion. Microsoft asked Sam to consult at a great hourly rate, which eased her financial load. The gym was thriving, and Sam was handling both roles, running the gym and working for Microsoft. But it was a heavy load. When she traveled, I'd help out at the gym. We were happy and started discussing starting a family once she could focus solely on the gym. After our first anniversary, Sam had to travel to Atlanta for a few days. We kept in touch every night, and on the second evening, she called me around 6 p.m. her time. She mentioned having a productive day but still had more work to do, so we kept the conversation brief. She promised to make it up to me the next day, and I told her I was heading to the gym to check on the staff. I worked out and stayed to lock up the gym around 9 p.m. Although I considered calling Sam later, I realized it was already past midnight in Atlanta, so I assumed she was asleep. In the quiet of the gym, I grabbed my iPad to pass time and opened the Fitbit app. My heart sank as I saw Sam's activity. It was almost 1 a.m. her time. Why was she working out at this hour? The more I looked, the more I knew something was off. I called her, but it went to voicemail, then again and again. On the 5th try, she finally answered. "Babe, is everything okay?" "No, it's not." "Are you hurt or in the hospital?" "Hurt? Yes, I've been hurt badly." "What happened?" "Tell me, what's his name?" "What? Whose name?" "The guy you're with, the one you're riding in the top position. What's his name?" "Luke, how did you know?" "Answer the question, Sam. Who is he?" "Oh, damn. How did you know?" "Next time you sleep with someone else, take off your damn Fitbit." I ended the call, turned off my phone, and threw it across the room. I couldn't sleep. I walked aimlessly for miles, crying. This couldn't be happening again. Why did I keep ending up with unfaithful wives? When I finally returned home, I went straight to the computer, emptied our joint accounts into mine, and closed them. I emailed my law firm asking for an appointment with a divorce attorney. The next day, I took time off to handle everything. I had the divorce papers and the prenup ready. I met with my accountant and lawyer to begin the process of calling in my loan to Sam for the gym, which included a clause that allowed me to demand full repayment within 60 days' notice. I couldn't believe how I had been deceived. The anger I felt was overwhelming, and all I could think about was making her feel the same way I did. A part of me just wanted revenge. I hadn't spoken to Sam since the incident and had no idea when she would be back. After throwing my phone in frustration, it was broken, so I had to buy a new one and immediately block her number. I reached out to Aubrey for support. She helped calm me down, reminding me not to act out of spite. As always, she was the voice of reason when I least wanted to hear it. I promised her I'd try to stay composed. I considered going to the pub to clear my head, but since Sam was due to return soon, I hoped to confront her when she got home. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it back in time. I walked in to find Sam crying. She ran toward me, but I pushed her away. "Don't touch me, Sam." "Oh, please. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." "Sorry? No, not happening." "Don't leave me, please. I don't want to lose you." "Lose me? You threw us away." "Luke, please, I was stupid. I thought..." "Thought what? That you could get away with it? That I wouldn't care? You thought you'd smash our vows and I wouldn't mind? Or maybe you thought you could sleep around and I wouldn't notice? Or maybe you thought I'd just keep loving you after you destroyed everything?" No, I didn't think that." "Then what did you think? That it would be just recreational sex? Do you think I'm that naive?" "It wasn't justified. It was just stupid." "Stupid? You didn't even think it through. If you needed something more, I was always just a phone call away. You couldn't wait a couple of days. Please, Luke, help us get past this. Let me make this clear. You let another man touch you the way I should have been the only one to. Don't give me any excuses. This marriage is over. It died the moment you let him into your bed." Sam cried out in a way I'd never heard before. I wanted to feel satisfied, but it just hurt. "Get a grip. You'll get divorce papers soon." "No, please, not a divorce. The prenup applies. You'll get nothing, and I'm calling in the loan. You owe me over $350,000. You've got 60 days to pay it, or I take the gym. No, Luke, you'll ruin me. Shut up and listen. If you sign the divorce papers, I won't call in the loan. Fight me, and I take everything. I don't care about the money or the gym. I just want you. Please, let's work through this." "No, Sam, you knew about my history with cheating wives, and you swore you'd never do this to me. But here we are. I can't trust you again. Not after this. Damn it, Luke. I made a mistake. But are you telling me you've never wanted another woman?" I fought to stay calm, biting my lip until it bled. "I've had thoughts, sure, but I never acted on them." "You did. Please, stop begging. It's pathetic." "But we were planning a family." "What? You really think I'd want my kids to have a mother like you? I want my kids to grow up with someone who respects me and themselves. I don't want them to learn from you." She cried harder, but I couldn't listen anymore. I left, telling her I'd come back in a few days after things cooled down. It was hard to leave her broken, but I had to. I needed to get away before I broke down in front of her. After a few days, I had calmed down. We talked, and I agreed to try counseling. I didn't want to be a failure again, and I still cared for her. But I didn't know if I could ever feel the same way about her. 6 weeks after our final counseling session, Sam and I returned home in silence. She had tears on her face, and I knew that night would change everything. At home, Sam broke the silence and began to share something that had been weighing on her. She revealed how, as a child, she was close to her father and made a purity pledge to him, vowing to wait until marriage. But at 18, she had given in to pressure from a boyfriend. And after that, things spiraled. One night, her father caught them in the act. He looked at her with tears in his eyes and said she was now a grown woman and could make her own choices. Sam explained how that moment shattered their bond. From that day forward, their relationship changed. They were no longer daddy and princess, but father and daughter, and the closeness was lost forever. As she spoke, I realized why she felt compelled to share this painful memory. Her past hurt was mirrored in my own pain. She explained that when I looked at her, she felt the same way she had seen her father's pain, like I was reliving her betrayal every time. Sam admitted that no matter how much I loved her or how faithful she was, I would always fear the possibility of her betraying me again. She believed something between us had been broken beyond repair. She paused and, after a long silence, told me that I deserved someone I could fully trust, and she deserved someone who saw her as she once was. We both needed to move on, separately, back at the bar. Linda's emotions were raw, tears silently streaming down her face, and I felt a lump in my throat as I relived the nightmare. After leaving Sam, I went to the pub. Kaylee, sensing something was off, quickly pulled me into the office. The door barely closed before I broke down in her arms, crying uncontrollably. She stayed with me for hours, helping me calm down, and eventually made me laugh. That's when she gave me my nickname, 3 Cheats to the Wind, reminding me I would get through this like I had before. Though I swore I'd never make the same mistake again, Kaylee knew better. I just needed time before I could move on. Linda, who had been quietly listening, nodded in understanding. She smiled slightly and placed her hand on mine. "You seem okay now. In fact, you look more than okay. You give me hope," she said. "I moved here for a fresh start, and fate brought us together so you could share your story." I reflected on my past mistakes. I realized I'd been chasing the wrong things. In high school, I prioritized image and fleeting desires over respect and shared values. I let the perfect woman slip away because I was too focused on the wrong goals. Linda softly guessed, "You were thinking of Aubrey." I smiled, closing my eyes. "Yeah, it took some time after Sam, but I finally realized the woman I needed was the one who had always been my best friend." Kaylee grinned, asking, "So you went to Dallas and swept her off her feet?" I chuckled. "You'd think so, but I somehow managed to mess that up too." Linda's expression shifted with concern. "You didn't go after Aubrey?" "I did," I replied. "But I was cautious, unsure if she was ready after Dennis's passing. We stayed in touch, and I was trying to find the right moment to tell her how I felt. Kaylee was my sounding board, and I even planned a trip to tell her." Linda's curiosity piqued. "So, what happened?" 4 weeks earlier. I woke up after a sleepless night, more like I never really slept. Tossing and turning until 3 a.m., I finally made up my mind. I was going to Dallas to tell Aubrey how I felt. If all went well, I'd come back engaged to the woman I'd wanted for as long as I could remember. Once I made that decision, sleep was impossible. My emotions were a mess, torn between excitement and fear, but I was determined to find out if she felt the same. It was Friday morning, and after a frantic rush to finish work, I bought a plane ticket for the next day. I was barely done by 4 p.m., so I stopped by the pub to tell Kaylee what I was planning. 3 cheats in one day? Kaylee teased. "I know, but I can't stay long," I said. "I finally decided I'm going to Dallas. I have to tell her." "Well, you don't? Listen, I've got to go grab a ring first." "Luke, Kaylee, thanks for everything. I couldn't have made it this far without you." "Luke, shut up and listen. Turn around." I turned to see Aubrey sitting in a booth with a guy, holding his hand. They were smiling at each other the way lovers do. My heart sank into my stomach. The pain hit so hard I barely made it outside before I was throwing up in the bushes. Stunned and disoriented, I turned off my phone and drove aimlessly. The tears blurred my vision, and before I knew it, I was in West Seattle, parked at Alki Beach. I sat there crying until the sun began to set. Eventually, I walked along the beach, lost in my thoughts, feeling completely empty. By midnight, I was back home, unable to focus. I canceled my flight, tried to work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a huge mistake. Should I let her go? Should I fight for her? Nothing seemed clear. By 2 p.m. the next day, I headed to the pub to find Kaylee. I hadn't spoken to her since I'd bolted the night before, and I knew she was probably worried. The second I walked in, Kaylee saw me and didn't look concerned. She looked furious. "You damn fool! What the hell were you thinking running out like that?" She slapped a beer in front of me and went off. "I had no idea where you went. Stay put while I take care of this." I stayed quiet, shocked. Kaylee never spoke to me like that. She muttered to herself while finishing up her tasks, giving me icy looks the whole time. When she finally stood in front of me, her expression was intense, like she was holding back a storm. "You're an idiot. You spent months telling me how much you love Aubrey and then you bolt without even talking to her? But you warned me. You showed me where she was." "Warned you? About what?" "Kaylee, I love her. I was going to go to Dallas and ask her to marry me. I had already committed to her, but seeing her with that guy, I just knew. She probably had other plans." Kaylee's face softened, but her gaze drifted just past me. Then I felt a hand on my back, and a voice I knew too well. "Is that how you really feel about me, Luke? I've been waiting for almost 20 years to hear you say those words." I turned, and Aubrey pulled me in. Our kiss was electric, fierce and passionate, like nothing I had ever felt before. In that moment, I knew. Aubrey was the one. After everything, 3 marriages, countless relationships, one real kiss with her confirmed what my father had always told me. Aubrey was my true love, the one I had been waiting for all along. Back at the bar, I wiped my eyes, trying to pull myself together. I'd almost lost her again. Kaylee shot me a look that was part disbelief, part amusement. You almost missed out on the woman of your dreams again? I didn't need her to rub it in. I could feel her eyes on me, watching as I tried to explain myself. I told you she was sitting with another guy. Kaylee raised an eyebrow, but I saw the playful glint in her eyes. I told him he was a damn fool for jumping to conclusions. Aubrey placed her hands on my shoulders, her touch warm and reassuring, and I couldn't help but smile. Kaylee, are you picking on Luke again? I kissed her then, just to feel that connection again. Kaylee, though, had to comment. You two want to take that somewhere private? This public display is embarrassing the customers. Aubrey grinned. We'll make good use of a room in a few days, right, sweetie? Linda, standing nearby, smiled, her eyes a little misty. You two are beautiful together. I turned to Linda, finally remembering to introduce Aubrey. Oh, sorry, Linda. Meet my fiancé. Aubrey extended her hand with a smile. Hi, Linda. Luke's manners are a bit off, but I'm Aubrey. Linda's eyes filled with happy tears. I'm so glad to meet you. Luke's been talking about you all night. Honestly, if he ended up with anyone else, this would have been the worst story I've ever heard. It's amazing when high school sweethearts find their way back. Aubrey raised an eyebrow, looking at me. Luke, you've been talking about me? I grinned, shrugging. You're the only thing worth talking about. Aubrey kissed me again. That soft, teasing kiss that made everything feel right. Oh, you're sweet. But we weren't really sweethearts, just best friends. I had to explain, couldn't let that slide. We both wanted to be more, but neither of us knew how to move from friendship to something else. Aubrey chuckled. Luke was a teenage boy, and I wasn't about to be the subject of his experiments. I couldn't help but laugh along with her, even as I admitted, okay, she's right. Sometimes I wonder how things might have been if I'd grown up faster. I always loved her, but settled for women who looked like her but were empty inside. Linda, always quick with a compliment, smiled warmly. Well, Luke was right when he beamed about how beautiful you are. Aubrey's smile was a little shy, but genuine. You two are too kind. The only thing that matters is when I look in Luke's eyes, I see his heart completely intertwined with mine. I feel like the luckiest woman alive. Linda looked at us both, still emotional, but now with a hint of concern. Wait, what happened to the other guy? Aubrey smiled gently, squeezing my hand. There was no other guy. That was my cousin Paul. I was staying with him while I looked for a place around here. I'd already planned to move back and hoped Luke would finally get the courage to ask me to marry him. Linda laughed, wiping away more tears. You two are perfect. I was hoping that I might have a shot at Luke, but I see that's a lost cause. I moved here from California for a fresh start. I was hoping to find friends, and maybe a soulmate. Kaylee leaned over the bar, her arm draped around Linda and me. Linda, you've got 3 new friends right here. Aubrey added, Yes, you have to come to the wedding on Saturday, especially since you're new around here. Linda hesitated, but the warmth in the room was hard to resist. I don't want to intrude. Kaylee waved her off. It's no intrusion, girl. Celebrating the marriage of 2 of your new friends. You'd better come. Everyone there will be from around here, and I'm sure you'll make tons of new friends. Linda finally relented. Okay, you've convinced me. Aubrey smiled. Luke, text her the details. Linda, still teary-eyed, shook her head. You really are the sweetest couple. Does it seem a shame you had to go through all that to get here? Aubrey paused, thinking carefully before she answered. I can't speak for Luke, but I think he needed those experiences to get his head on straight. As for me, I wouldn't trade my time with Dennis or the joy of raising our 3 kids. I loved him with all my heart, and wishing things had gone differently with Luke doesn't really matter. The timing was just right. My love for Luke never left me. It's as strong as my love for Dennis. I'm lucky to have had 2 great men fill my life with love. Linda wiped away a tear. That's so beautiful. It really is a miracle you two finally got together. I shook my head, grinning. It wasn't a miracle, it was a conspiracy. Kaylee leaned in, grinning. When Luke and Sam broke up, I called Aubrey. Luke had already told her, but I didn't call for that. I asked her when they were going to wake up and get together. Aubrey, smiling now, added, Dennis had been gone for 11 months. I wasn't ready for a new relationship, but I knew getting with Luke was always on my mind. I just didn't think he was ready either. We talked weekly, and I could hear the hurt in his voice. So I told Kaylee to help him heal while I figured out if he'd be ready when I jumped in, finally getting to the part that felt like the turning point. It took about 6 months, but I realized I couldn't think about anything or anyone but Aubrey. I even thought about moving to Dallas to start over and build a future with her. Aubrey laughed. Of course, he didn't know I was already planning to move back to Kirkland. Shh, I'm telling the story, Kaylee teased. And then Luke almost ruined everything with his disappearing act. Aubrey rolled her eyes, laughing. Kaylee! I grinned. Anyway, when Aubrey walked up behind me after Kaylee chewed me out, it felt like I went from darkness to light. Before I could even speak, I was kissing her like never before. It was electrifying, like my heart was finally beating again. Aubrey, remembering the moment, smiled at me. That was some kiss, baby. Every kiss with you feels like that, I said, looking at her lovingly. So, when we finally pulled away, she looked in my eyes and asked, You tell her, sweetie. Aubrey smirked. I said, Luke, do you love me as much as I just heard you tell Kaylee? He was saying such sweet things about me. And I answered, I love you with all that I am. Marry me, Aubrey. That was 4 weeks ago. Linda gasped. Wait, you planned an entire wedding in 4 weeks? I nodded. I've wasted 16 years not being with the woman I've always wanted. I knew she was the one all along, and I blew it with too many bad choices. We weren't going to waste another second. The wedding, when it came, was perfect. There was no question about it. Aubrey was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Linda came to the wedding, and while she got to know everyone, she especially hit it off with Aubrey's older brother, who was single. They've been inseparable for months now, and Linda has become one of our closest friends. I'm no longer Uncle Luke. The kids now call me Papa Luke. They even asked if they should call me Dad. I told them I already loved them like my own, but their dad was special and they should always remember him as Dad. Papa Lucy worked just fine. Before the wedding, Aubrey asked if I wanted a prenuptial agreement. No way, honey, you are my life, my everything. There's no need for a plan B. So, no 3 cheats to the wind sequel? She teased. No way. Being married to you is better than anything I deserve. My days of marrying cheaters are over. Maybe one of our kids will write a story about us someday and call it, It Only Took 4 Tries, or something like that. Speaking of kids, Mr. Riley, we need to set up a nursery. My past relationships are long gone, and I can finally say with all my heart, oh yeah, life is good.